Hello and welcome to the Atlas Agency, a channel all about Arkham Horror the card game by Fantasy Flight Games. I'm your host Brandon, and this video is a rundown for the set of promo cards that's being distributed with the hardback version of the Hour the Huntress Arkham Files novella. Hour the Huntress is the first in a new line of investigator-focused Arkham fiction titles, and it features the investigator Jenny Barnes as its protagonist. Jenny Barnes is one of the investigators that's featured in the deluxe expansion, The Dunwich Legacy for Arkham Horror the card game. And hardback copies of Hour the Huntress come with 4 promo cards for Jenny Barnes. I've had a chance to try these cards out, so today I'll share my thoughts on them. Afterwards, I'll close with my 2 cents on the way these promos are being released. Note that I won't be talking about the novel itself in this video. I'm still in the process of reading it, so in this video I'll just be talking about the cards. Hope you enjoy! So this promo set comes with 4 actual game cards, one of which is just a mini-size card. Then there's also a 5th card, which is just a rules explanation card to tell you how to use these promos. As I said in the intro, these cards are included with every hardback copy of the Hour of the Huntress novel, and it doesn't appear to be a limited time thing, at least at this point. I say hardback. As far as I know, there's no paperback version of this book currently, though you can download a digital version. Note that you do not have to own the original Jenny Barnes Investigator from the Dunwich Legacy to use these cards. Owning this promo set would let you play as Jenny Barnes even if you didn't have that expansion. If you're familiar with previous Arkham promos, you may have expected these cards to be print-on-demand quality, like the Marie Lambo promo or any of the standalone scenarios. That's actually not the case. These do match the standard Arkham printings, just the same as the cards you would get in any deluxe box or Mythos pack, so that's kind of a nice surprise. Let's go ahead and walk through the individual cards. First, you get a Jenny Barnes Investigator card with alternate artwork that matches the cover of the book. It's got the exact same stats, abilities, and even flavor text as the version of Jenny in the Dunwich Legacy, at least on the front side. Aside from the art, the only other change is the flavor text on the back side of the card. The little character introduction paragraph is different. The promo version's text is actually pulled from the blurb on the back of the novel. I'm personally sort of indifferent to this artwork. My investigators have it bad enough as it is, and I'm not sure I want to look down and see them illustrated in a state of permanent distress like this. That's a subjective thing, though. You might very well like it, and of course you can see it for yourself here, so you've probably already made up your own mind. The second of the 4 promo cards is a matching Investigator mini card with the same artwork. You can see that on the right here. Personally, I quit using the mini cards to track positions a long time ago, but it's nice of them to include that here. The next 2 cards are really the meat of this promo. They use a brand new mechanic, Replacement, which is making its debut here. Basically, replacement cards act as either replacements for or supplements to the Investigator's unique signature cards. When you're building your deck, normally Jenny has to include both her Twin 45's asset and the Searching for Izzy weakness, but you can replace both of those with Jenny's 2 replacement cards from this set instead, or you're even allowed to include both her original signature cards and these replacements if you prefer. You're not allowed to change this choice in the middle of a campaign, so if you start with the replacement cards, you can't switch to the original set later. You also can't mix and match between the 2 sets, so you can't take the weakness from one and the player card from the other. I like the idea of replacement. I think it's a pretty neat way of adding some extra variety to the individual investigators. One more option you can consider when you're deck building. Let's look at the actual cards. The replacement for Jenny's signature card is Green Man Medallion. I wasn't familiar with the Green Man, but I guess it's a real-world sculptural or artistic motif, basically a face surrounded by or made up of leaves and branches. If I was further in the novel, I might be able to tell you how that relates to Jenny, but right now I can't. So the card is a 1-cost item asset that occupies your accessory slot, has the relic trait and 2 wild icons. It's, of course, Jenny Barnes deck only, and it has the replacement keyword. As a fast trigger, you can spend up to 3 resources and exhaust the medallion to place those resources on it as offerings. Then, when you resign or when the game ends, for every 6 offerings on Green Man Medallion, reduce the experience cost to the next card you purchase before the next scenario by 1. So when you play the card, it really has no benefit in the current game unless you're just pitching it for its icons. Then you load it up with resources over the course of the game, and in exchange for doing that, you're rewarded with an experience point discount that you can use on the next card that you buy. Note that unlike a lot of the player cards that grant victory points, this one does not apply to the whole group. It's just Jenny that gets this discount. I'm normally a really big fan of cards like Delve Too Deep that earn you extra experience, so the idea of this card is pretty exciting. I do think that Green Man Medallion is difficult to use, or at least expensive, and relative to Delve Too Deep, you're probably going to see fewer games where you manage to make the medallion work. But when you do manage to make it work, the reward can potentially be huge. I think there's something to be said for being able to play a Delve Too Deep sort of like you're ripping off a Band-Aid. You find a moment, you play it, and you deal with the consequences, but when it's done, you've banked your 1 experience point, and you can move on. You may even already be near the end of the scenario or close to resigning when you choose to play it. With Green Man Medallion, you need to pay on it for at least 2 turns to get a 1 experience discount out of it, and if you want a bigger payout than that, then you're going to need to commit at least somewhat early in the scenario to try to use it. Maybe before you really know how much breathing room you're going to have. As far as the resource cost, if you have Jenny's innate income of 2, plus a lone wolf to get you 1 more per turn, you could potentially be making the maximum offering of 3 on every turn if you're not spending money on anything else. That's not bad, but it basically neutralizes the advantage of playing Jenny in the first place. Also, this is an asset, so you do need to be mindful of threats like Crypt Chill or Pushed into the Beyond that could destroy it and wipe out whatever investment you've made into it. I think the less pressure there is on Jenny individually, the more value you're going to be able to get out of this. If you're playing in a low player count game, like solo or 2-player, where Jenny has to carry more of the weight, and especially on a harder difficulty setting, you may not be able to get much out of this card. I did a run on the core campaign in hard mode with a friend, and I was using these replacement cards. I think I ended up playing this for its skill icons every single time that I drew it in that campaign. I just couldn't find a moment where I could afford to commit to working this card. On the other hand, when you do successfully use this, it can feel pretty amazing. My personal record is actually 42 resources loaded onto it as offerings. That was during the Echoes of the Past scenario. That earned me a 7-point discount on my next card purchase, which I used to buy the gold pocket watch for 1 experience point. That felt pretty amazing, especially accomplishing that in just the 3rd scenario of the campaign. Having a card that powerful, that early, for that low of an experience cost. That's basically a whole campaign's worth of playing a Delve Too Deep once per game, all earned in just 1 game. If the medallion didn't do anything else for me that campaign, I think it still would feel like it was worth it. So even if it's played for its icons most of the time, if you can find the right slow moment in the right scenario and really push it, I think it still can justify itself. Moving on to the final promo card in this set, we have the replacement weakness, Sacrificial Beast. This is an enemy weakness with 4 combat, 3 health, and 2 evade. It's got the Monster and Dark Young traits. Again, Jenny Barnes deck only. Replacement. It spawns at the location farthest from Jenny, and while it's in play, Jenny Barnes cannot gain resources via card effects. When it attacks you, it hits for 1 damage and 1 horror. So while this guy is on the board, he's going to shut off Jenny's ability so that she only gets 1 resource per upkeep. It also prevents you from gaining any resources off of things like Emergency Cash, or Hot Streak, Lone Wolf, or Dr. Milan. Even though that combat value of 4 is on the high end for weakness enemies, so far I haven't really found Sacrificial Beast to be too much of a problem. I think a big part of that is the fact that it spawns at the location farthest from you. It also doesn't have Hunter, so ordinarily it's not going to move. That means that when you draw it, you're not really forced to deal with it immediately. You can deal with it on your own terms, and if you have a combat-oriented teammate who can go take care of it for you, that's even better. I've been running a Jenny and Yorick pairing, and Yorick is usually pretty fine with this showing up, since it's not hard to kill and it lets him trigger his ability. I imagine the same might be true for Roland. And depending on the scenario and how late it is in the game when you draw this, if you can afford to give up the resource gain, then sometimes you can just afford to ignore this entirely. I think that's part of why I slightly prefer this to Jenny's original weakness, Searching for Izzy. If Searching for Izzy comes up really late in the scenario, then you may not have time to deal with it, and you may end up stuck with that mental trauma, which is a problem you won't have with Sacrificial Beast. Overall, I really like this set of replacement cards. I don't think they're strictly better than the originals, but they certainly are fun to play with. I've yet to try playing with both sets at the same time, but it seems like that would be a fine way to play, and that may be what I default to in the future, though I do also think there's room to strategically pick which sets you want to use based on things like the difficulty or the player count, and what teammates you're going to have. I think some investigators are more defined by their signature cards than others. I don't think Jenny's signature cards are all that defining, really, compared to something like Ashcan Pete and Duke or Akachi and Spirit Speaker. It's a nice bonus when Jenny draws her 45s, but I don't feel like they impact how I play Jenny very much. So this is kind of a tame introduction to the idea of replacement cards. I really kind of look forward to seeing a really radical one like Ashcan Pete, something that would really change the feel of a character significantly. Last thing I'll talk about with these is the distribution method. I'll wade into those waters a little bit. As I said, these come with hardback copies of the Hour the Huntress novella. It looks like this is the first of several books in this line that'll have similar promo cards. When this was announced, a lot of people expressed disappointment that game content was being locked behind a $15 novel. While on the one hand I like these cards and I think it's nice to have a new vector for Arkham content, I definitely understand that frustration. There's been one previous book-related promo, the Marie Lambo Investigator, that came with pre-order copies of the Investigators of Arkham book. That one didn't feel quite as bad as this one. I think the biggest factor was that they made it clear from the beginning that Marie would eventually be included in a regular expansion. I think that took a lot of the sting out of having a promo card attached to that book. The Investigator's book was also a single release, not a series, and even though it was still Arkham fiction, I think because of the production value on that particular book and all of the artwork, it had a little bit of a broader appeal to Arkham players that might not be interested in these novellas in the same way. I'm usually pretty forgiving of Fantasy Flight's business model. The core set thing has never bothered me, but I would love it if Fantasy Flight committed to releasing these replacement cards in an unspecified future expansion release. I think that's a much more customer-friendly approach. People who bought the novels would get the benefit of getting these early, but eventually they would make their way out to everyone. Unfortunately, I don't have any expectation that that's actually going to happen. I guess for the moment my excitement at the cards outweighs my disappointment. If the books end up being interesting, that'll help, but I recognize that a lot of Arkham fans just aren't going to be interested in reading this regardless, let alone 4 or 5 other books just like it. With that, we'll wrap this up. For more Arkham content, including a list of all the promo cards that have been released for the game, check out the Atlas Agency blog over at atlasofarkham.wordpress.com. As always, thanks for watching the Atlas Agency, and good luck in your own investigations of the mythos.